Happiness through curiosity on TRS Clips. In 1947, after we became free, why did they decide that the freedom struggle needs to be taught in this manner for every 9th and 10th grader in the country? I remember in my 8th grade, though we were learning about all the Delhi dynasties, you were also having some inputs about Shivaji Maharaj. You were learning about little medieval Indian history. You know, there was a few chapters on Ashoka. There was all this much cooler history to learn about. I used to actually enjoy preparing for those tests. You know, like when you're tested every week on... I used to love studying about Ashoka. And the moment 9th and 10th grade started, it was just the freedom struggle. And then they ask you to ratto dates and, talk about the 5 principles of the Quit India movement. That's when it became boring and dry and also extremely unilateral. I've realized through the show, history is not singular.
Yeah.
History is extremely subjective.
Yeah.
There are a few things that happened, but a lot of the other stuff written in your textbooks are probably perspectives of the person writing that textbook in 1947. I'm also assuming that from 1947 to about now, every Indian has been taught the same version of history.
Yeah.
What was the mentality of that guy or that lady in 1947? It was clearly someone from the Congress writing history books because they portrayed Jawaharlal Nehru in a certain way. And then you hear all these conspiracy theories about Jawaharlal Nehru even today. Some of which can't be spoken about on this podcast.
Yeah.
But you hear stuff like, oh, these guys were just agents of the British. I want to know what the truth is.
So, I mean, Jawaharlal Nehru, not being, trained in history, wrote The Discovery of India. And that kind of became the template for modern historians to follow.
What is trained in history?
To be a trained historian, you be a
what goes into it?
The whole process of what research is, how do you triangulate facts, how do you question sources, are you retrofitting your historical narrative, for contemporary politics? Is there actually evidence-based this thing in the past? All of that. I'll give just one example. You spoke about Ashoka. We've all been told that you had the Kalinga War. Ashoka was a Hindu and he was called Chanda Ashoka, who killed his own brothers, and then he was a violent guy and millions massacred in the Kalinga War. And then suddenly he had this moment of epiphany where he said, I'm going to become a Buddhist, right? And so Buddhism is a religion of peace, without saying it as much. So when you are in the Hindu fold, you are given to elements of violence. But the minute you embrace Buddhism, you become this lovely person who sends emissaries of peace. His own son and daughter become monks and they are sent to, Sri Lanka and all these places. But did we know that actually Ashoka was a Buddhist 4 years before the Kalinga War? We were not told that at all. But there is, source-based evidence, his inscriptions and so on, which are prior to the Kalinga War, already shows that he was a Buddhist by then. So why? And this whole myth of Ashoka was created largely also by the British and taken ahead in the discovery of India, which was then substantiated by our historians who wrote the history. And one more example I'll give you.
It was divide and rule for Hindus versus Buddhists.
Yes. So that is a big agenda and project for Marxist historians, where every time you say that, the Islamic conquest, which someone like an American historian, Will Durant, called the Islamic conquest of India as one of the bloodiest stories of human history. Not just Indian history, but human history. Just between 1000 CE and 1500, the establishment of Delhi Sultanate, as per another historian, Professor K.S. Lal, the population of the subcontinent fell by 8 crores. So 8 crore people did not just, fall down dead just like that. So there was, there was large scale violence, there was large scale, oppression, genocide, destruction of temples. All of this was there. So that those things when you bring out, the normal thing that is told is, but then Hindus also persecuted Buddhists. Now, there was really no evidence of that, of Hindu persecution of Buddhists at all in the history. There are just three people. I think there was Pushyamitra Shunga, there was Mihirakula, and there was Shashanka of the Bengal Gaud dynasty, who kind of broke stupas and did all of this. But the ultimate reason for the downfall of Buddhism was the Islamic conquest. But that is also not mentioned. Instead, to create this dissensions between Indic faiths and to create this kind of a fight among people, I think that is really, really problematic, and which has been done all through. And another example, you spoke about freedom movement and how it's been taught to us. So immediately after freedom, there was a project which the government of India had commissioned to be written on the complete history of the freedom movement. And it was still, we just got freedom. And so a lot of people were still alive who had participated. So through interviews and so on of the survivors and then so on. And there was a very eminent historian, R.C. Majumdar, who was made the chairman of the group, who was to write this history. And R.C. Majumdar told Nehru's government that, hey, look, I'm not going to be a court historian and write what you dictate me to write. I'm going to dispassionately analyze everything. He had very critical views of Gandhi and his flip-flops and all of that, which I mentioned earlier. He said, I'm going to write all about this. And it's going to be an inclusive movement about the tribal movements, about the sannyasi rebellion, about the revolutionary movement, the violent stream of freedom. But do we know that immediately after that, when he said, this is going to be my terms of reference, he was summarily dismissed from the committee. Okay. He was a very, very celebrated historian of the times. And in his place, a very pliant, IFS officer who was not even a historian of modern India. He was some medieval, Persian literature and all of that. He was doing that. And he was a diplomat. He was made the head of this committee, clearly with a mandate that I want the history of the freedom struggle written in a way that it is monochromatic, singular, like what you said, which only glorifies the non-violent movement, which only glorifies Gandhi, which only glorifies the Congress and so on. And all the other streams which were there should not be a part of this. So that gives the other historians of the time, if the ruler is going to say that anyone who goes against my wish is going to pay the price for it, they're going to say, okay, now I know a formula to follow. And if I do that, then I'm going to survive. At least today, we don't depend on state largesse. We have other means. We have social media. We have the internet. We have
TRS.
We have Ranveer to take our voice across to, the millions who watch your show. But in 1950, there was no TRS. No, so you needed state largesse. You needed support of the system. And anybody who went against the path paid a very heavy price, with their careers being destroyed, fellowships, all of that, especially in the university system. So a historian then becomes almost like a chef. The master says, itna namak dalo, itna mirch dalo, that's my, taste. And accordingly, he or she cooks the meal for you. And that comes down to us as gospel truth. And you keep repeating a lie 100 times, it assumes the shape of truth. And then there's anybody who questions it and actually brings out true facts, is actually condemned as a heretic.
What was the phrase you used? Triangulating facts.
So triangulation of facts is when, in history, there's no absolute truth. There is one absolute truth, of course, as how it happened. But for us, we are sitting thousands of years away from the happening of that event. So when we're looking back at it, you depend on sources. Now, the sources are compromised. Either it is incomplete, it's destroyed. What are your sources? Your textual matter, inscriptions, coins, epigraphic, sources, or textual material, right? So court historians have written something. They probably eulogize their king or sultan or whatever. So there is some amount of bias that comes there. Invasions have happened, so temples have been destroyed, so the inscription is destroyed, the manuscript has been torn, it's suffered the ravages of time. Some moth has bitten off half the thing.
Wow.
So palm leaf manuscript has gone. So your source is incomplete. And then you as a modern historian is approaching that with your own biases. Everybody has some bias. As much as they say we are very independent, I think each of us have our biases, right? So that is there. Then my own incompetence, maybe I don't know how to read Sanskrit, I don't know how to read Persian or Arabic or whatever, and I'm trying to be a historian of ancient India or medieval India. Then those problems come in. So with all of these filters, you are coming to the absolute truth, ekam satyam, that is going through so many filters of intervention, and you have a very small matter that is left of it, right? So when you're trying, one source says one story, someone else says something else, contradictory stories that are there of the same incident, about a particular ruler, about a particular war or an incident. There may be three accounts of it. So a modern historian needs to look at all of that and come to some kind of a middle ground. This one says something, like right now I'm working on this on the life and times of Tipu Sultan. Now Tipu Sultan, very, very controversial figure, but then there are French accounts about him. There are about the same battle that he may have fought. There's a French account of it. There's a British account of it. There's his own court historian who's written something in Persian. Since he fought the Marathas all the time, the Peshwa Daftar has its own account of the same incident in Marathi. The Nizam's accounts, who also participated in the battle, has his version. So you can see how many sources are there for that one episode. So whom are you going to trust as the truth? Each one is telling the story from their perspective. So you have to sit somewhere in the center again, hear all their stories and say, Acha, the truth is perhaps in the center point of all their exaggerations and all their narratives. Sometimes everything converges to one thing, but at other times it is not so easy. And that is where you ask, what is it to be trained to be a historian? How do you look at these sources? How do you, which do you give importance? How do you, all the exaggerations and the hyperboles, how do you discount that and come to a version of truth, which again is your version? It's very, very subjective. It cannot be the truth, which is why I always say, Ranveer, that a historian needs to be one of the most humble people, because what you say is not the absolute or ultimate truth. Neti neti, as we say in Indian philosophy, this is not it. Maybe someone else has a better way of analyzing these multiple accounts and comes out with another truth. And then all my research for decades can be thrown in the dustbin because someone else has found a new truth or found a new source which challenges
your life's work.
Yeah, my life's work, my thesis, my entire this thing, which is what is the intellectual beauty of the discipline. Because if everything about the past is already known and it is carved in stone, what is it that historians like me are doing? I mean, are we just regurgitating what is already there, or are we trying to explore? Is it a discovery into the dark tunnel of the past of which none of us have a clear idea because it is so distant?
Yep. I'm going to cuss a little bit, okay? How the fuck do you teach kids history then? Like, how do you test them about what's right? And I've been thinking about this as you're giving your answer. My only solution here is that you don't teach them in depth about anything. You teach them generally an overarching long-term format of history. Like in your 10th ICSE, CBSE exams, test them on the last 2000 years of Indian history rather than just the last 100 or 200 years.
Yeah.
Because you're going to teach them in depth about something that may not even have been accurate. And then they'll grow up, listen to podcasts and go, I hate the Indian education system. But teach them about culture in general and then let them deep dive into it as adults. I don't know, as a historian, do you have a contradictory opinion?
No, I think that's true because at that level of a school student, all these nuances and these, this is almost philosophical in its abstraction, right? What I just tried to put about the truth and how we seek the truth and so on. I don't think that'll make sense to a 10-year-old or 12-year-old who's, reading history. So a lot of countries outside, history is also used as a sense of, to give us a sense of what it means to be an Indian. What were our we've been always told what are our failures, but also what are our achievements. What is it that our ancestors did they just squat for 5,000 years and not do anything? Did we just sit allowing every group to come and invade us? Did we cover in front of invaders and invasions? Did we put up resistance? What was India's contribution to human knowledge in various streams, and of which India has had immense contributions? But barring some, we discovered zero, or we had a few names here and there, we don't know the greatness of Indian contribution to mathematics, to chemistry and alchemy and metallurgy, Ayurveda, yoga, the mind body soul equation, metaphysics. Who are the people who contributed to all of that? Today yoga is becoming such a big thing world over with the International Yoga Day and all of that. But then yoga itself is a very advanced, it's not just asanas and gymnastics, that it is a complete holistic treatment of the human mind, body, soul. So those type of things, and a general perspective of kingdoms, peoples, cultures, not restricted to only a Delhi-centric narrative of Indian history, but every part of India. So today in our history textbooks, how much of the Northeast is covered? Is the Northeast not part of this country? The Ahoms of Assam ruled for 600 years. But I don't know if a child, can you name 2 Ahom Rajas?
No.
So forget child. So
I heard about Ahoms on the show for the first time.
Exactly.
I hadn't even read about it in history textbooks.
Okay, some people say, is Indian history only about memorizing lineages of kings? Okay, it's not. So then let's talk about people's history, subaltern history, as the Marxists love to talk about. What about the subaltern history of...
I don't even know what this is.
The people's story, subaltern voices.
Okay.
It's like not... Why do... the counter when I usually say this, why is the Cholas, the Rashtrakutas, the Pallavas, Shatavahanas, Kadambas, Gangas, Vodayars, all these dynasties are not spoken about and so on. There's, but Indian history is not just a litany of dynasties. Okay, fine. So why is there so little about the cultures of people? Whether it's of South India, how much of Sangam literature of ancient Tamil culture not spoken or taught to students, or the different indigenous communities of the Northeast. There are more than 400 indigenous communities there. So if you're talking of people's voices and you say you don't want to talk about dynasties and kings and queens, even people's voices, what are the languages and dialects that people of the Northeast speak? What are their musical instruments? What are the dance forms and so on? What are their cuisine? Do we know that? So history gives us, it's a mirror in which we identify ourselves as a nation, as a civilization, as a people. So if we are saying Indian history, every part of India needs to find a representation, and not just Delhi, because Delhi is the center of the universe for everything, right? Whether it is history, whether it's media, one small incident in Delhi captures all the attention, and maybe second in line is Mumbai, because it's the financial capital, it's Bollywood and all of that. But other than that, even in today's contemporary media narratives, if in the news, large swathes of the country don't even feature in the manner it should. So India needs to snatch, Bharat needs to snatch her narrative back. I think from a Delhi-centric, narrative in all aspects, not only history, but media, culture, popular, in films too. Hindi cinema would only look at a very Punjabi, Delhi kind of a culture. Anyone else is looked at as the other. Right from that Padosan, where, Mahmood had this caricature of a South Indian. First of all, everyone below the Vindhyas is a Madrasi, not realizing that there are 4 distinct... a Kannadiga is very different from a Tamilian, from a Telugu speaker to a Malayali. But then all of them would be branched off as Madrasis who have a horrible Hindi accent, and they'll be saying AJIO and this and that. And they made fun of, there'll be this one there. And so that, and then everyone from the Northeast is Chinese, with features which are different and so on. So this caricaturization of our own countrymen and women in popular culture extends to all aspects. How we look at them, if we don't even give them the respect that they deserve, how is it that you're going to Sardars are made fun of in Hindi cinema. So there's some mainstream concept, and everything else is fringe. Everyone who doesn't look a certain way or doesn't behave in a certain way is the other, and needs to be made fun of, needs to be looked down upon or derided. And I think that is very, very deeply problematic. In Hindi cinema, a Maharashtrian woman is always just the bai of the house, who's always, what is the importance of, or some Pandu Havaldar, right? So the othering of different communities, we find that, I think, not only in popular culture, but it extends to the way we look even at our history and our past. And that is deeply problematic if we want to integrate ourselves as a country.
Yeah. And honestly, I feel that's the magic of long form conversations just like this. So if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to TRS Clips for more.